Excellency, Mr. Shuichiro Kawaguchi, Ambassador of Japan, Ms. Amanda Serumaga, UNDP Resident Representative for Mauritius and Seychelles, Mr. Vidya Munigan, Chairperson Business Mauritius, Mr. Kevin Ramkalwan, CEO Business Mauritius, Ms. Lifa Chung Kai Swet, Director Statistics Mauritius, Mr. Gilbert Yani, Chairperson of Business Mauritius Economic Commission, members of the Diplomatic Corps, representatives of international institutions, members of the business community, senior officers of ministries and government bodies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. A very warm welcome to each one of you present here at Kudon Art Center for this dialogue on survey results on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on businesses in Mauritius. I remind you that this is an initiative of Business Mauritius in collaboration with Statistics Mauritius, the United Nations Development Programme, and funded by the Japanese Embassy to Mauritius. We will begin with the welcome speech of Mr. Vidya Munigan, the President of Business Mauritius. He is the Managing Director of Cerizon Mauritius. Cerizon is a cloud technology company in human capital management listed on the New York Stock Exchange. With over 27 years at senior executive level, Vidya has a broad international experience working with businesses in the US, Canada, UK, Europe, and South Africa. There's a lot more I could read, but I now have the honor to invite Mr. Vidya Munigan, Chairperson of Business Mauritius, for his welcome speech and to tell us more about this.
It is my pleasure to welcome you all to the conference to disseminate the results of a business survey on the impact of COVID-19 outbreak in Mauritius. 2020 is a year for the history books. We started this year with optimism and ambition to make 2020 our best year, and then COVID-19 came. What do we have instead? Public debt at unprecedented levels, destruction of tens of thousands of businesses, loss of hundreds of millions of jobs. Many of them will never come back. Livelihood has been impacted like never before. Before February 2020, it seemed unthinkable. Almost the entire white-collar workforce of many countries would be working solely from home. It seemed unthinkable that air travel would plummet by 96%. The economic and social disruption caused by the pandemic is devastating. While the pandemic took the vast majority of businesses by surprise, epidemiologists and other experts had long warned it was only a matter of time before such a disaster struck, and yet the world was totally unprepared. The crisis seemed to have been with us for a long time, and many are tired. The availability of vaccines sooner than expected has created some optimism. The reality is the road to recovery and reinvention is going to be painful and long. We have a new normal that has been created. Virtual working needs to be used to its full potential. This can help companies to scale up their businesses. Labor mobility has fallen sharply due to travel and immigration restrictions. The concept of labor mobility will change. If people can't relocate for work, work will relocate for people. We have to embrace digitalization, the use of digital technologies to impact how work gets done, transform how customers and companies engage and interact, and create new digital revenue streams. With vulnerabilities in cross-border supply chains, exposed supply chains will be restructured with built-in redundancy and resilience at the expense of some efficiency. Manufacturing will come closer to home markets, boosting the trend towards regionalization and relocalization. The new normal can be a stepping stone to the new future. Government needs to be agile and respond swiftly to changing conditions. Reforging relationships between government, businesses, and citizens. Consider new paradigms. Look at new business models that are more sustainable and inclusive. It's an opportunity to eliminate waste and inefficiencies in business. The pandemic is significantly affecting our domestic companies and is having a knockdown effect on the economy, especially on vulnerable sectors. In order to better understand the impact of COVID-19 on Business Mauritius entered into a strategic partnership with Statistics Mauritius. to carry out an in-depth business pulse survey with the technical assistance and financial support from UNDP and the government of Japan. The survey was conducted by DCDM Research. A very big thank you to UNDP and the government of Japan. The survey will look at the short, medium and long-term impact on business performance and employment, will identify practical policy recommendations, and try to understand the immediate and future needs of businesses. So, I will pass you back to the MC and he will guide you onto the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.
The public health crisis due to the COVID has brought about the biggest economic and social crisis since 2008. The pandemic has hit the world unexpectedly and drastically transformed the socio-economic environment worldwide within a short lapse of time and brought about unprecedented challenges with enduring effect on both the life of people and on the functioning of the economy. With the pandemic, things will not be the same as before. We, I mean the business community and others, including Statistics Mauritius, are all rethinking our business operations in one way or the other and creating the new normal. Worldwide, to prevent large-scale closures of businesses and soaring unemployment, government agencies, employer organizations, and business associations are assisting enterprises in many ways. However, the kind of support enterprises need is not always clear. Even today, countries are still living different experiences of the outbreak, with different implications for the population and businesses. Authorities are also responding differently, directing closures of businesses, restricting population movement, and taking more nuanced measures. The pulse survey conducted by Business Mauritius and Statistics Mauritius, with the assistance of UNDP and the government of Japan, has helped to collect useful information on the current situation of businesses to better understand the kind of assistance they need. While some countries have launched a series of panel business surveys since the outbreak, Business Mauritius, together with Statistics Mauritius, has conducted one round of the survey in September-October 2020, once the outbreak situation and emergency measures had somewhat stabilized. The pulse survey captures business responses on how their performance, workforce, prices, investment in business resilience have been affected by the pandemic. It aims at assessing the short, medium, and long-term needs of businesses, analyzing innovative business models in place to build resilience, and identifying policy measures to address business vulnerability and improve agility. Should we have other rounds of the survey? According to me, yes, we should. While the results of this round give a picture of the current situation, follow-up rounds will tell more about the effectiveness of government support measures and innovative measures taken by business themselves, prompting for adjustment. More importantly, future rounds will assess the ability of businesses to continue to operate as they begin to do so with reduced support measures. Through this period, it would be important to capture information that would help to monitor business dynamism. Other data that need to be looked into are the creation of new businesses. Because of the uncertainty caused by the pandemic, creation of new businesses are expected to be marginal. So, any increase under the current circumstances might suggest innovative startups that are bringing new ideas in the economy and possibly growing rapidly. Such businesses will also need support on a number of fronts. Finally, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the UNDP and the government of Japan for their support. Thanks also to businesses for their participation in the survey. And as we say in the statistics community, users of statistics are often the providers of data. So we're happy to share with you today the results and hope that they will help you in future actions. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, first of all, for having made the time out of your busy schedules to attend this event. As everyone has said, almost 9 months ago, the world came to its knees when COVID-19 pandemic hit affecting every single function in society. We have been caught in the world's worst pandemic that has affected lives of billions of people, putting everything we do to the test. We're here today to hear about the scale and scope of disruption that this pandemic has had on businesses in Mauritius. At the beginning of the pandemic, the IMF projected the global economy to contract by 3%, and has since revised this number to 4.4% in October 2020, following the debilitating impact on the economic activity. This will be accompanied by elevated unemployment in 2020 and 2021 across both advanced and emerging market economies. For the second quarter of 2020, the International Labour Organization estimates a loss of 305 million full-time jobs globally, disproportionately affecting the workforce in the private sector. The impact of the pandemic has been felt even more acutely in small island developing states, including Mauritius. Most of us may agree that any form of disruption to the global system has far-reaching follow-on effects on island economies, given their heavy dependence on regional and international markets. If we agree, then a disruption at the scale of the COVID-19 pandemic undoubtedly poses a graver threat to the functioning of the SIDS more than it does to mainland economies. Ladies and gentlemen, the pandemic has presented businesses with many challenges, ranging from unparalleled disruption in supply chains, the sharpest fall in demand for firm output since the Great Depression, and significant cash flow constraints, amongst others, that you, the practitioners, are best placed to highlight during this dialogue. Building back better will, for the most part, call for efforts to strengthen businesses to facilitate recovery. It's at this point that I must applaud the government of Mauritius for having acted swiftly to extend unwavering support through the comprehensive and inclusive stimulus package to protect people from disastrous impact of the pandemic, while in equal measure ensuring that enterprises are supported to remain in business. Because while people must survive and indeed thrive, businesses must also remain afloat to support this survival. The two must work in tandem. Businesses are an important avenue for building a resilient economy through generating and sustaining employment, enhancing the productivity, growth, and guaranteeing support of goods and services that cushion the economy in the case of challenges in the global supply chain. While the challenges are glaring, the pandemic has presented several opportunities, as has been mentioned by previous speakers, that businesses may consider to re-engineer their processes and successfully emerge in a new normal. Since the onset of the pandemic, several businesses have exhibited creativity in the way they serve their people, including embracing digitalization and repurposing their operations to respond to the pandemic. As we continue to absorb this new reality, I urge the business community to hold dialogues of this kind continuously to reflect on the several issues of concern about recovery. For instance, what's the new normal in Mauritius, and how will the corporate agenda evolve? How will consumer priorities and supply chains evolve? And what is the readiness of your businesses to ensure your product lines remain relevant to the dynamic market, both locally and globally, even in the context of the Africa Free Trade Agreement? The policy reforms that are critical to resuscitate businesses. The purpose of this survey, as has been mentioned, is to collectively establish credible baseline information to facilitate dialogue on these issues, including to contribute to the evidence-based decision-making for sustainable economic and social development. For the immense effort in establishing this survey, allow me to salute the management of Business Mauritius and Statistics Bureau for looking out to UNDP as a trusted partner to support this effort. We thank you. Our support to this process is intended to deliver the UN Secretary General's call to the United Nations system to support multilateral response efforts at country level. In Mauritius, the United Nations Socioeconomic Recovery Plan has been entrusted to UNDP to provide technical leadership on recovery efforts. Allow me to also note that this survey would not have been possible without the financial assistance of the government of Japan, extended to UNDP to support the people of Mauritius in dealing with several recovery challenges, not only this effort. We are so grateful to the people of Japan. Thank you, Ambassador. UNDP is especially pleased that this strategic partnership has allowed the country office to be able to work towards at least 4 sustainable development goals of the 2030 Agenda. SDG 8 on decent work and economic growth, SDG 9 on industry, innovation and infrastructure, SDG 11 on sustainable cities and communities, and 17 on partnerships, and 5, of course, on gender equality. As I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, we are left with only 1 decade to achieve Agenda 2030. The key findings and recommendations of the Business Pulse survey being launched today should be viewed as guiding baseline data on the work that remains to be done. I fully support the recommendation of the Director of Statistics Mauritius that this survey should be a regular and recurring event. I encourage business leaders and representatives of government to take into account the results of the survey to ensure business continuity for rapid recovery and timely resumption of operations. Guided by evidence-based data, I am convinced that businesses will evolve with a high level of confidence towards a resilient recovery. As we proceed with the discussion, let me invite you to reflect on the gendered implications of the pandemic. These should not be overlooked as more women invest in small businesses. Hence, the needs of women in small businesses should also be considered in policy-making processes and in the formulation of special initiatives for dynamic and inclusive recovery. On this note, I wish you all a fruitful dialogue, and I thank you for your attention.
He mentioned that this money comes from Japanese government, but it's from taxpayers' money. And I'm for sure this is the best use of money. Anyway, Ms. Amanda Selmaga, resident representative of UNDP, Mr. Kevin Lamkarwan, CEO of Business Mauritius, and Mr. Vidya Munigan, Chairperson of Business Mauritius, Ms. Lee Fan Chun Kai Sweat, Director of Statistics Mauritius, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. It is with great pleasure and honor that I am joining you today at this stunning place. I am further delighted to be here as it is my first official function as a new ambassador of Japan to such a beautiful country as Mauritius. I would like to seize this opportunity to thank and commend the collective initiative of UNDP, Business Mauritius, and Statistics Mauritius in arranging this important event in view of assessing the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on businesses in Mauritius. A timely event where all countries around the world are taking a series of measures to deal with economic and social impact brought about by the pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 health pandemic is an unprecedented event that has created a stir in economies, lives and businesses all around the world. Mauritius has not escaped this economic shock. On the public health front, Mauritius has achieved important and strategic success in containing the virus, and life and work have returned to normal at a fast pace. However, while some parts of the economy are recovering, others are continuing to struggle with reduced revenues, increased costs, and uncertainties regarding unemployment. To sustain its economy, the government of Mauritius itself has come up with several economic stimulus measures to preserve employment and stabilize its economy. But despite this, we can unfortunately witness the cessation of some businesses. The hardest hit sectors have been the travel and tourism and manufacturing industry, among many others. In response to the challenges arising from the pandemic, the Japanese government has decided to extend financial support to several countries. Since the outbreak, the government of Japan has tried to respond comprehensively to the needs of Mauritius, which resulted in the signing of a grant aid agreement between two countries to mitigate the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and consolidate the health system of Mauritius in August 2020. Besides this, considering our position and the needs of Mauritius, the government of Japan mobilized a supplementary budget for the project supporting an inclusive and multi-sectoral response to COVID-19 and addressing its socio-economic impact in the Republic of Mauritius through the UNDP. I would also like to put on record the zeal and dedication with which the UNDP is leading this very important project. Today's event is a major component of this project and will help Mauritian economy by assessing the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, which is still affecting on business in Mauritius. Now is the time for organization to rise to the challenge, restructure with a coordinated approach, and embrace innovation and technology for recovery. I hope the key findings of this survey help identify the main challenges that enterprises experience from COVID-19. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that there will be more room for cooperation between Mauritius and Japan in the post-pandemic era, including this support to Mauritius. Japan is willing to address the challenges in collaboration with the international society in order to overcome the current crisis. Japan and Mauritius share strong diplomatic relations with several exchanges of agreements to boost cooperation. This assistance represents another positive development in the long-standing and dynamic relationship between our countries. Together, our countries will prevail and be stronger and better than ever. I thank you for your attention.
Precise, thank you. Dear friends, I request your indulgence firstly to cut short on the protocol. I think perhaps recognize and appreciate the presence of His Excellency Shuichiro Kawaguchi. It's your first appearance. Thank you so much for having chosen us today. Amanda, how can we not recognize our collaboration? I remember the first, we've had many Zoom meetings during the pandemic and the lockdown, and perhaps one of the most useful has been the one with UN and UNDP team, and being today a key result of really trying to get the facts around where has the pandemic hurt us and where will it hurt us going further. Vidya, Jean-Pierre, my team, Gilbert, who is also today team of Business Mauritius, although he has a larger role, Amy, with whom we've had so much discussions, and on this particular survey, but also more globally on the state of the economy as we move forward. Dear friends, members of the press, distinguished guests, thank you so much. Comment je fais? Where's the click? Here? Ah, allez, super, merci. Peut-être, just to set the scene, this is a strategic partnership between Business Mauritius and Statistics Mauritius. It's a business pulse survey. We've received the technical assistance from UNDP, funded by the Japan supplementary budget, and the survey was conducted by DCDM Research after a procurement exercise. The idea was to understand the impact on business health of the formal and informal sector, the collateral effects, and specific needs of small and large companies. So specifically the objectives of the survey: short-term, medium-term and long-term impact of COVID-19 on business performance, assess its impact on employment, current and expected, and the needs of businesses, being able to evaluate it, find what are the innovative business models that firms have adopted or intend to adopt, and incorporate the different dimensions: gender, sustainability, gender being extremely important for Business Mauritius and for Mauritius as a whole, sustainability, and as cross-cutting themes, and then come up with practical recommendations. As we started, I think we're very ambitious. I think the survey is a very complete survey. Today I'm going to give you an extract of the survey. The full report will be online and you can look at it in all depth. But I think one of the key highlights, and that's why I'm really happy to hear with UNDP and SATS Mauritius that we want to continue. We need to continue on this survey fully, but we'll also see that there's some thematics on which we'll need to focus and drill down to some granular levels. So we contacted 2,700-ish companies. Interesting partnership between Business Mauritius, our partner members, and their membership, and also the Statistics Mauritius samples. We were targeting all the private companies. The fieldwork happened between September and October, and the methodology was online survey, but followed by telephone conversations to complete it. And this was done with all the logic tests, etc., on the questionnaire. A quick word again on the profile of the companies. Obviously, most of them were from the private sector, some listed, some NGOs, and a little bit of government private sector, government-owned private sectors. Primary, 5%, secondary and tertiary being basically where Mauritius is more higher weight. Particularly, I mean, today we don't talk really about export to domestic, there's a convergence, but those that are seen as being EOEs, 33% and 67% of domestic mainly. All sizes of companies, from the micro to small, so micro being, of course, under 10 million, small, medium, the famous MMEs, as mid-market, and the large companies. What is also very interesting is for this survey, we really were talking directly either to the CEOs or the senior management, and it's really, therefore, very valuable information from them. A gender idea of 77 of them being male, the remaining, of course, being female. So quickly, therefore, into the results. It's important to understand that this being a survey of businesses and people respond as they wish. Therefore, it's a respondent view of the survey, and that is very important because it means that for some of the criteria we can use it as a baseline, but others we need to be more careful with the data, and that of course has been taken care of by the CDM research. The operating status, perhaps that was the first question. What happened during following the pandemic, following the close down, what is the status of your company? In September, October 2020, how is your company doing? It's good to see that 78% of the companies are actually operating normally, but normally to be qualified, i.e. the business is running. 18% are still operating partially, and 3% of businesses are in fact temporarily closed. The most affected in that terms of operations have been the micro, which you can't see, but the micro firms, where 72% only are operating normally. During the pandemic, what were the top 10 impacts of COVID-19 on the companies? Very interesting, because we see that the first issue was cancellation, postponement of projects, orders by clients, so lack of demand. 54% showed delayed receipt of payment from clients, extending the payment cycles. 53% was about clients not paying their bills. And 49% showed that there was increased cost due to purchase of PPEs, basically the cost of doing business through the pandemic was increasing, and 43% felt that the social distancing at the workplace was also disrupting the workplace. Financial difficulties was there? Previous slide? Ah, pardon, excusez-moi. Voilà, pardon. So 38% financial difficulties in making the payments, 37% in disruption in supply chain and input prices, reduced logistics and reduced investments. Moving forward, so this was the as-is, what had happened during the pandemic. Moving forward, what are they seeing in the future due to the pandemic? And two key elements are on the left side. 67% report that they believe there's a fall in demand for their goods and services, and 53% are facing or expect to face cash flow issues. However, we should also note the idea of foreign exchange rates affecting the price of imports. Foreign suppliers delay, obviously with the logistics happening, and delays in delivery for shipping, for receiving and shipping to customers. Those are the top 5, and of course the rest are under 10% of the firms report the rest. But the fall in demand and lack of cash flow are key issues. Impact on sales. So they considered from April to September of 2020 compared to the same period last year, how were the sales doing? So 74% experienced a decline in sales compared to the same period. I'd like to, however, point out that in the overall segment there, that 6% actually had an increase in sales. So dire situation, but some companies were able to make some increase in sales out of it. And the biggest increase actually came from the mid-market segment, where 9% of companies were able to get some increase in sales. But overall, 74% of our respondents experienced a decline in sales, which is therefore, by level of turnover, the magnitude of sales. I'd really like to take you just to the last column, decline of more than 30%. What it really means is that during this pandemic, 41% of the respondents registered a decline in their sales of more than 30%. And that is huge, because if you have got a decline of 30%, your business model needs to change. You're really in a dire situation. So 41% have this decline of more than 30%, and they are looking therefore at reviewing their business models. There's a need of restructuring, there's a need of more resilience. To be also shown that out of this, tu m'entends pas? Ok. Désolé, je vais parler un petit peu plus fort. Ça ira? Très bien. Désolé. Vous m'avez suivi jusqu'à l'heure? Ouais, à peu près? Très bien. Hop. Je suis en train de rater les slides. Voilà. Impact on turnover for this year. So the turnover is for financial year 2020-21, what is coming, as opposed to last financial year, 2019 to 2020. So 71% expect lower turnover and operating income in this coming year, and 46%, so almost 1 out of 2 companies, expect that the turnover will decrease by more than 25%. And that is actually quite important. However, overall, we can see that at the end the green cells, 10 plus 1, 11% of companies overall expect that there will be a 5% or more increase in turnover in the coming year. This is important because those are the companies which can actually look at investing. The animal spirit seeing growth, so it's really a percentage around 10% of a community that will be looking at investing, whereas the other one will be looking at ways of reinventing themselves. Je vais aller un peu rapidement, et puis s'il y a des questions après, please feel free. The impact on exports, again, situationally, this year compared to last year. So 33%. 33% engaged in exports of goods and services, and 65% of whom saw a decline in their exports. 13% you will see are uncertain, and for us this uncertainty is in fact an idea of not knowing towards the worst, and not knowing as being neutral. Therefore, there is an expected population of 78% who are expecting decline in their, or may expect decline in their exports. Very importantly, the most affected when it comes to exports are the SMEs. Importantly, a little bit obvious, but also very worrying, because the SMEs are showing 76% direct of fall in medium SMEs of fall in exports, with 9%, so more than 80% of them, 85% expect probably fall in exports. In the medium term, as they move forward, really the question was, how do you see the next 6 months? It was very difficult to be able to project longer than that, but when they look at the next 6 months, the first finding is that 52%, last column again, 52% expect that their exports will decline, and will decline by 20% or more. And there are 24% that are actually uncertain, and again, uncertain in these circumstances is a little bit difficult. So 1 out of 2 companies should decrease in exports, out of which large companies, amongst large companies, 1 out of 3 expect that the exports will decline by more than 20%. Again, for a company that is export-oriented, 20% decline is extremely important. For MMEs, for the mid-market enterprises, it's 1 out of 4. It is very also important to note that this question relates to volume. There is a distinction to be made in terms of turnover base, because foreign exchange gains on sales might blur the effect on volume. All of them are showing, well, these are the figures for volume of exports, which is what we wanted to look at here. Selling prices, the selling prices, 33% expect a general price increase in their over the next few months. It is greater for MMEs and corporates, probably because of their greater proportion of supply chain costs, because the supply chain costs will continue to increase, and also in terms of forex costs. If we are able to remove those that are uncertain in terms of the price increase, then it's a little bit less than half of the respondents believe that prices are expected to increase. The impact on cash flow. So overall, more than 37 companies believe that the cash flow, the available cash flow has decreased, out of which 22% for small SMEs, who are a little bit more resilient because in that sense, but 52% for the large companies, for the corporates. So particularly severe. Cash flow issues for the large companies are particularly severe. The sustainability changed a little bit the outlook. Overall, we can see that 7% of the companies surveyed believe that they don't have more cash flow. They have cash flow for less than 1 month, and 34 have cash flow for 1 to 3 months. So in fact, 41% of the respondents have less than 3-month cash flows as from September, October, which means by end of the year, unless they are able to find new markets, they will have no cash flow left. SME is particularly difficult, 56% for those who are micro, and 46% for those who are between 10 to 50 million. And the story is a little bit lower for the MMEs and corporates, who are in the range of 30%. And with the cash flow difference, how is the capital expenditure being affected? So we can see that 22% have reduced or cancelled or frozen their capex because of cash flow issues or because of lower income. 21% have not been able to really quantify it, so they've said they've cancelled or postponed in general, and 18% actually talk about uncertain macroeconomic indicators. Really, the second and third reasons, in a way, lead to the idea of business confidence, business sentiment, and the fact that there is a real effect on the sentiment of businesses to invest right now. Some of them talk about reduced markets, and others reallocation of costs from capex to opex. However, in those investment plans, what we see is that with regards to sustainability projects, to the vision and the approach, objective of sustainability for businesses, we can see that it remains key in the strategy, particularly for corporates. 65% of the corporates are actually maintaining their plans for investing more, or actually not changing. So 65 investing more and 32 not changing. So overall, almost 97% of corporates are going to keep their sustainable investments, whereas overall also we see that 92 plan to continue. And that is actually very important because it shows that post-pandemic, or with pandemic in the equation, sustainability still remains a very, very important motivator. Now, how have companies been able to maintain employment? Obviously, one of the most important social aspects of businesses is how we provide employment. Now, it is extremely important to note that despite the outbreak, 79% of the companies maintained full employment. So they kept all their full-time employees. We see that 21% overall actually reduces their full-time employees. The earnings, again, in 72% of companies, the earnings remain unchanged. But for some of the companies, including the corporates, we see that it is a little bit higher than the 18% above. It's around 24% of earnings that have been reduced. Particularly in that sense, it is about overtime and other earnings. So as companies have stopped operations, for example, in the hotel sector, earnings of the employees they would gain from overtime and other earnings actually fall. We looked at the ability to work from home, and we see that for 63% of the companies, they are able to work from home. More so within the large companies, 81% of whom can work from home, and a little bit less with the small SMEs. There is two elements here. One is actually full, the green one is entirely possible, so the whole operation can work from home. Overall, it's 20%, and then partially, we see 43% are partially able to work from home. It's quite natural when we look at some sectors, how they do it, but we do see in some of the detailed data that professional services and ICT are more favored towards working from home. Un peu plus vite, j'imagine. Ah ben voilà, c'était. Voilà. So, anticipated change in workforce, how will companies look at employment and hiring in the coming months? We can see that 55% will either maintain or increase their workforce, out of which 7% hope to increase and 48% will maintain. This is also a very encouraging sign. It means that more than half of the respondents will continue to maintain their workforce. And out of the others, there are 17% that are for the moment uncertain. Therefore, the policies to help them maintain jobs could be extremely interesting. Highly so in the wholesale and retail sector, and of course a little bit less in the hospitality sector, which is facing the issues of the borders. Presence of business continuity. It's it must be firstly said that 93% of the respondents found that their organization's business continuity plan was useful, somewhat or very useful in the current pandemic, so encouraging that we should really move towards greater business continuity planning. 44% of those respondents already have a BCP in place, But in that, we can see that larger companies are much better equipped than the smaller companies. So SMEs need perhaps greater interest in BCPs. The second element, work from home, BCP, and then e-commerce. What was the situation? How ready is Mauritius with e-commerce? 54 companies faced no challenge. They were able to go ahead on the e-commerce plans. So 54%, more than 1 out of 2 companies were there amongst the respondents. But for the others, what we understood is that the website traffic resulting in crash of their website. So the infrastructure around going online. Others had issues particularly with regards to online payments. And thirdly, the idea of stock management when it comes to e-commerce was seen as key issues. Some opportunities. We started discussing amongst the technical team, what was really the new normal following the pandemic. Where are the things we should look at for opportunities? And this slide actually gives us some of the ideas. In the new normal, the idea of cost saving extremely important. 42 companies introduced cost saving measures following the pandemic. 42% again went into new ways of working, flexible time, work from home, a mix of all that. 33% got into serious preparation of the BCP. Managing customer expectations was also an important element. Developing e-commerce services, investing in technology, we see that very strongly. Promotion of environmentally sustainable projects. The pandemic has also brought customers to be more environmentally conscious, and establishment of research and development teams so that they are able to find out the new opportunities, as well as diversify their business lines. So we've seen some companies move towards masks, sanitizers, etc. Expected time to return to normal. The question was, how long will it take, do you think, to come back to normal? 59%, so almost 60% believe that it will take them more than 6 months to return to normal. Now, 6 months in the views of the respondents is a long time, because they couldn't really project beyond 6 months. And 10%, and that is quite worrying, said they will never go back to normal. And out of that, 14% also foresee a risk of closure, higher uncertainty. Now, this has to be managed. It's really a perception study, and therefore we need to find how to reduce the risks. So we went on the government support measures, which was part of the idea of helping businesses. Again, I rejoin and Amanda and the others who recognized the support of government during the pandemic. So we went on to understanding what were the support measures that had been applied for. We excluded WAS, the wage assistance support, from this first slide, although we have data afterwards on it. So there were support mechanisms from DBM, from the SME Equity Fund, from the Bank of Mauritius, from the SIC and the ISP, which depends on the SIC. What was interesting is out of the respondents, only 22% applied for the support measures, and out of those 22%, only 14% received the required financial support. However, out of those 14% who received, nearly all of them, so 86% of those 14%, were satisfied with the support that they had received. That was also quite encouraging, because I think there was hard work done to find those measures and to implement them, and I think that was recognized by those who benefited from it. We then looked particularly at the government wage assistance scheme, which was a very important part of the strategy for keeping jobs during the crux of the pandemic. We understand that 82% of the companies surveyed had received the wage assistance support, and there were more medium and mid-market enterprises that benefited. Medium being the 10 to 50 million, and mid-market up to 250 million. Very interesting that overall 82% received, but we could see that the two sectors that were benefiting higher than the others were the manufacturing sector and obviously the accommodation and food services, which were deeply affected. We then went down to understand what was the adequacy of those measures, and we find out that the 51%, so half of the respondents, found that the measures were adequate. Before, it was those who applied. This is those who make a value judgment on whether it was adequate or not. So half of them found them to be either adequate or very adequate, and particularly the mid-market companies saw them as being more of the mid-market enterprises, so almost 60% saw those measures as being adequate. And at the time, lesser by the larger companies. Only 35% of the corporates found it to be adequate, but we have an explanation for this, because at the time of the survey, September to October, the Bank of Mauritius, in fact the MIC, was still negotiating with the corporates for what would become the term sheets for MIC. So this is, in a way, part of the explanation for the larger companies, but overall 51% found those measures to be adequate. When we asked them what are your future government support measures that you would like to look forward, the star is the government wage assistance scheme, and that goes beyond the accommodation and food sector. But we also see 19%, so almost 1 out of 5, believe that the financial assistance, the guarantee schemes that are in place should be continued and enhanced, and some of them talk about grants, and so the blended facilities. And 17% talk about reduction or waiving of taxes and charges. The various taxes, various charges, CSG was indeed one of them. The way forward, I think before going really on the way forward, what we found out was we had zoomed into issues, and now we would need to further zoom to more granular level on some issues. So what I present right there are the areas of discussion as we can move forward, and that will include some technical discussions and perhaps some thematic surveys, until of course we would like to run the next similar survey in 6 months' time or so. But overall, the survey confirms that businesses are in a very serious situation, they have poor visibility, and they're likely going to have adverse impacts on their finances, on employment, on investments in the coming months. The areas which we find for future discussion, which are extremely important and interesting, the first one is private sector investments, because we do need to realize that public sector investments cannot replace private. I'm a Keynesian, I'm from Cambridge School, therefore born Keynesian. But in a country like Mauritius, we can't expect public sector investments to replace private sector investments. And we need the private sector investments to continue creating jobs, to continue creating growth. But it's a new world, and we need to go and help, as Business Mauritius, help our members think of where are the future investments. Are they in the green economy? Are they in the ocean economy? We see there's a lot of opportunities around sustainability, around ICT infrastructure, so there's quite a bit of work, and work from home, so there's quite a bit of work to be done at the level of where will the private investment be coming from, where and how. How, because I think there will need to be some support for businesses to move into them. The second part is about labor market. We understand that it's to be able to remain competitive, the quality of the labor market will need to change, and we also have identified very clearly skills mismatch and retraining possibilities. So that second element is also going to be extremely important. Thirdly, obviously, we've seen about cash flows, sales, loss of 30% or more of your turnover. It cannot be business as usual. There needs to be a rethinking in terms of competitiveness. We need to talk about agility of businesses, and there's a whole discussion, I think, that needs to go there. And again, some more specific granular data. The work from home practices, we've seen it's been adopted, work from home, e-commerce, BCP, all this needs to form part also of a new structure of how to implement this, how to create those business models in our membership. The investment in sustainability, we do understand how extremely important it is, and how it can be an opportunity for growth as we move forward, at least for a new mindset, which helps both the businesses and also the customers. And finally, we do understand that we need to work further on support measures. It's not going to be an easy ride out of this pandemic. It will take time for us to go through. We talk about a 9% growth next year, but we do talk about a 14% contraction this year. Therefore, even by end of 2021, we'll still be behind our 2019 GDP figures. So there's a lot of work to be done to get companies out, to get a new model, and to get support mechanisms in place to help both businesses and the economy. I will stop there. I just wanted to, before I leave you, just to tell you that the full report is actually much, much richer than the already very long presentation I've made. But we have detailed data on the impact of business capacity to operate, on companies' commercial performance and financials, on sustainable development, production capacity and output, availability of inputs and finished goods. We've barely touched on it, but it's extremely important. On employment and earnings, the business models, the long-term impact on businesses, government support measures, and future business needs, as well as the idea of the way forward. So it is a very rich report, which I know will be online very shortly, probably after the couple of discussions we have here, and I encourage you all to really take time and look at it and contact us as and when you need more information. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much. If there are any questions to be taken, I'm happy to do it, or we can take it later on after the roundtable.
Kind introduction. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm sure you enjoyed Kevin's presentation. Obviously, tracking the impact is critical, hence the importance of carrying out an in-depth business plan survey. And in this context, I would like to put on record the excellent collaboration and strategic partnership between Business Mauritius and Statistics Mauritius, with the assistance of UNDP and the government of Japan. So let's move to the panel discussions. Given the strict time constraints, we will first open with a generic question to each of you, and then I will follow up with one specific question to each of you. So first, closer? Okay. Okay. Yeah. So first, the generic question. So we can see from the survey that businesses are still in a serious situation across sectors. Looking at your respective sectors, in what ways did the pandemic and its related restrictions impact your sector? In addition, what are the main problems faced by operators within your sector? In order. Ladies first.
Hi everyone. So yes, I'll answer the first question. So basically talking from an SME's perspective, which is a very large segment, it's very difficult to focus on one sector of activity, so I'll cut across the SMEs. So basically the main challenges as we saw were the cash flow realities and the reduction in the demand for services and products. Those were major issues facing SMEs. And of course, the difficulty of SMEs are that they are fragile, that they don't have backups, and the reality was that we could not access bank facilities as quickly as we needed. Okay, it was a lengthy process, and it's very worrying actually to see that only 22% of SMEs had resort to financial facilities. There's a scope to ask those SMEs in another forum, why is that the case? Because, of course, most of them did not have the capacity beyond 6 months to carry on their operations as usual. So the main issue was the cash flow. And the second one is that as much as we see there are many support mechanisms, financial support mechanisms in place, is that we are shifting into a debt model. And we would also think that it's important to balance this with an investment model and encourage angel investors. There are other ways to face financial difficulties than just debt. And we would like to have policy mechanisms in place so that SMEs could resort to angel investors and investors at large and to open their shareholding, why not, in order to survive this crisis, and have incentives provided to investors in this sense. The other element is that we see now an economic climate of uncertainty, but of caution. And this caution is causing a lot of a lot of concerns for SMEs to project themselves on the long term. We need our business leaders, locally and internationally, to get their trust back and to get back to work and trust in their capacity to bounce back in this crisis. The SME sector heavily relies on the biggest corporates for that to happen. So this climate of trust and of bouncing back has to be the dominant element today, and not just the support mechanisms. That's it for me.
Thank you for this very interesting point, Eric.
Okay, so on the textile side, which is 100% export, so what we saw is all our markets closing from March to June. And obviously we had to close all our factories at the same time, which was really the worst ever scenario we couldn't imagine. Then we saw rebound from July to September, very clear, very, very positive, with a different profile of markets, because a lot of people are working from home. When it is hot, they wear t-shirts and polos, so very good for the knits industry, which is pretty strong in Mauritius. It's becoming cold, it's more about sweaters. For the woven shirts and classic garments, there's a total collapse. So that's really what we saw. Now there's been a second lockdown, exclusively in Europe, not yet in the US, but it may be coming, and therefore there is a slowdown again. So it's really stop and go in many ways. What we saw, obviously, the online business going super high, and one of which is ASOS in the UK, which is a big customer from Mauritius, which has really supported the industry in Mauritius. On the other hand, the traditional retailers have been really collapsing. So just for you to know that the retail sector, apart the fashion retail sector, was very sick before the COVID. Oversupply, whenever you go into many cities in the world, there's too much choice, too many brands, and a lot of them with weak balance sheets, highly leveraged by the finance sector maybe, I don't know. So the COVID was a total chaos, and we experienced many insolvencies, Chapter 11, Dépôt de Bilan. The most recent one is Arcadia and Topshop, which is one of the historical customers of some of the big players in Mauritius. And therefore it's a kind of a chaos, so not an easy situation to deal with. So again, the first step was to protect our business cash-wise, and this is what we try and do with our teams, and see how to move forward. So that's very much where we are today. So depending on the week, so Monday we wake up, we just look around, assess the situation, and move forward. So we'll obviously talk later about how to deal with the future, as far as we can see it. But for the time being, it's more about observing, adjusting, protecting the business.
Merci. François?
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Well, as you probably guessed, the tourism sector is probably the worst hit industry with the border closures. It's been 9 months since the borders are closed, because the phase 2 opening is just a quarantine which do not attract any customer, any tourist. So at the moment we have some hotel open for quarantine and local resident, but in average it's not providing the operators with more than 10%, or it's less than 10% of their normal revenues. So it's just to keep the hotel going, getting the staff back to the operation, maintaining the hotel, but it's a situation where we've been 9 months at a standstill, and there is more than 3,000 operators in the tourism industry. We're talking about all the registered companies operating in tourism. So our main challenge is today the lack of visibility. Obviously we can't make decisions, we can't make plans. We are doing many scenarios, we're changing scenarios, and some people are saying we are modeling hope. So we have uncertainties around the border opening, which would be phased, and the vaccine, we don't know what availability and process it will be. It's probably the key factor of resuming the tourism is the vaccine, but it's complicated, and we don't know when the borders will open. probably when 20% of the population is vaccinated. We don't have information on that. So we also have no visibility on air service, because tourism works with air service. And the future of Air Mauritius is a challenge for us to know what's going to be the model. So the challenge today for the industry is really to manage cash flow. We have a wage assistance scheme which is covering 50% of our wage bill and 25% of our total cost. So we still have 75% of the cost to cover until border opening. Even when border reopen, we think some experts say it's going to be 2 years for it to recover to normal. Some are saying 2, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. So we have a spectrum of scenarios which we have to be ready for. So we have to really prepare for the worst. We are cutting costs as much as we can. The labor laws does not allow us to restructure for the time being. It's a big issue. So we need to find ways to be able to restructure. So that's the impact is very strong. And we think that the worst is in front of us, because a lot of companies are resilient until a certain time, and we feel that there could be lots of bankruptcies or voluntary administrations coming in the sector in the next months, because our tour operators, which are not paying us, they are paying on a payment plan. Some are going bankrupt, and so we have debtors not coming in. So that's a big problem for the operators.
Thank you. Let's stay on tourism and then we'll come back to the sector. Obviously, François, as you described, it's a very tough situation. The outlook for recovery is extraordinarily uncertain. I was looking at the figures before coming here. Our contraction would reach 80% this year in tourism. So the very survival of the businesses obviously is at risk. In this highly uncertain environment, what do you think would be the key policy orientation which would facilitate the transition period to recovery? And a tricky question as a follow-up, how do you see the tourism of tomorrow for Mauritius?
Okay, well, the transition, for sure this crisis, we have to look at it positively in some ways. It's an opportunity to rethink our model, because even in 2019, the tourism industry was not doing too well pre-COVID. There was a decline in arrivals and air services in 2019. So there was a need to rethink the industry anyway. And I think that with this crisis, we have to rethink and remodel quicker and restructure the industry. And we do have to now respond to some traveling trends which are being amplified and accelerated. Well, digitalization is going to accelerate, not only for the business, but for the traveler journey, and also for the distribution of our product. So the tour operators, traditional will go probably bankrupt, the online will probably, exactly like in textile, so there will be a change in the distribution, so we have to respond to that. And we have to respond to a new traveling environment and customer expectation. People will look more for well-being experiences, for sustainable experiences, so more meaningful holidays. So we have to identify this trend and come with a response, whether it is at a national level or at an operator level. But I would say that during this transition period, the most important thing is to have a very good dialogue between the public and the private sector. I think we are having a very good dialogue with the Minister of Tourism, who are actually listening to us and trying to build a strategy with MTPA. But I think we need a much bigger dialogue, because tourism is not only Minister of Tourism, it's talking to a lot of ministry. We need to have a revival plan, national revival plan, which involves all ministries, a lot of stakeholders. So it's a time to do it. It's a time to do it during the transition period. And obviously we will need continued support. We will need to review at very strict labour laws. I think that the labour laws in Mauritius are archaic and are not adapted to the future. We need more flexibility on the labour laws, otherwise it will stop the industry from flourishing in the future.
Thank you. Let's move back to manufacturing. So even in parts of the world where the initial effects have started to recede, dislocation appear likely to remain a fact of life for some time to come. The pandemic obviously been a massive disruptor, but there is also room for opportunity. In the Mauritian context, what are the opportunities that have arisen following the pandemic, and what transformations are needed to remain competitive? How do we resolve the interlinked challenges of productivity enhancement, technology absorption, and quality job creation?
I don't know. No, it's a big challenge. At this time, I believe that all of us are looking at, first and foremost, our positioning in the market. So which market we should supply tomorrow, which product, which customer as well. So really rethinking where do we see our market of tomorrow. That's the first element. The second element is just like tourism. I mean, in any industry, it's the right time to relook at who we are and how we can really focus on our best assets, our best people as well, and be leaner and fitter for tomorrow. And that's another clear objective. The other element is, there's obviously lack of visibility, not only in 21, but further down. So beyond COVID, there will be many more crises, isn't it? So we just need to ensure we have the right talents to deal with the crisis of tomorrow. And therefore, the focus on skills and people, which will help us navigating into the future, is really something which should be at the core of what we do today. The other element is, you mentioned digitalization, huge opportunity for all of us. So in terms of customer experience and operational excellence, and a many better way to deal with our organization if we move fast in digitalization. Sustainability is super important into our industry, which is having a bad reputation in terms of environmental impact. So surely something we should work on. The other element which is specific to our industry is China. So China is the biggest player in our industry worldwide, and with the USA and China relationship, a number of retailers, not only in China but in Europe as well, are starting to move away from China, which open up new opportunities. So in that respect, my opinion is Mauritius should team up with Madagascar, for that matter, or other neighboring countries, because in isolation we're too small to be attractive to a number of customers or investors. So people are more looking at regional approach, clusters, and therefore I would really encourage the different government and authorities to think together about how to move forward. We saw China signing a trade agreement with their surrounding countries. I believe that the region and Mauritius can play a big role in that matter. In our industry, Hong Kong used to be the initial place, so that was where the factory started before China, and today it's a platform. So there's an opportunity for Mauritius as well to play a role of platform maybe for tomorrow. So like in any crisis, we just need to rethink. The only issue is that again we have to move step by step, and in the meantime dream about tomorrow and survive at the same time. So we need to play on the two elements. I forgot to mention in the first question as well, one of the biggest challenges we're facing today, which is specific to Mauritius or the region, is the logistic. So which is a real pain. There is no flight. The frequency of the sale has reduced drastically, and the costs went super high. And actually, I'm having a Zoom meeting with a USA customer tonight, and I know they're going to tell me that they want to reduce their business with us because of lack of flexibility and speed. At the time when they don't know what they're going to sell, they want to have shorter lead time from the time they buy to the time they receive their goods, and if logistics is very poor, it's really affecting us for now. So that's something which really, with the business community and the authorities, we need to find rapid solution to those, because what goes out, moves out, doesn't come back usually. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We have some time constraint and receive a message, so we'll finish with the last question. Jennifer, the SME sector plays a critical role in the Mauritian economy. 49% of total employment, nearly 36% of gross value added. So the survey shed some light on the impact on your business, on small businesses, and the financial fragility of many businesses in spite of the various support schemes. What are the top challenges for SME today? And more generally, what do you think should be our key policy priorities to ensure a V-shaped rebound in 2021 and beyond?
Okay, so I think the spirit of local and made in Maurice is very strong. We have to maybe fine-tune this message now to include SMEs. Working local doesn't necessarily mean working SMEs. An SME needs to have more local business. So this is something we can work on. So there needs to be policy measures fostering and boosting and encouraging demand, encouraging companies to work with SMEs, whether in the public or in the private sector, reassure all the stakeholders, and also sensitize customers and organizations and business leaders in the responsibility they have behind the decisions they make into outsourcing and working with other companies. It's a matter of survival and of employment now. There's such a low demand that you have to allocate your demand very wisely and very responsibly. And I think SMEs should be a priority in the minds of the leaders making those decisions. On the other hand, I think it's important on the legal framework, which we have seen a lot of changes recently, to have a more granular approach when it comes to SMEs, instead of unilateral measures in the law. Same for the wage support. They are obviously more fragile industries, as we heard for tourism and for SMEs. So there needs to be some kind of granular way to implement different wage support mechanisms and different support mechanisms at large. Also, or rather lastly, as I said before, I think we should have more balanced mechanisms where we focus on innovation as well. And SMEs do not have that resilience and the skills to innovate in such difficult situations. So we need maybe training on innovation and resilience. And also, policy measures should encourage and foster entrepreneurship. I strongly believe this crisis is going to give rise to a good new batch of fresh entrepreneurs, whether they were previously employees, because that's going to be a solution for them, is to create their own business, or whether we are talking of the young generation, we would need, if we want the economy to continue and to move on and to rebound, we would need to have good policy measures to encourage entrepreneurship, and also to enable entrepreneurship. We have unprecedented ways now to start a business with the current financial facilities available to us. We need to encourage those entrepreneurs out there to come and to hire people and to carry on the employment responsibility, because 49%, as you said, of employees work for SMEs in the country. So, yeah, I think that's mostly
Thank
the
you.
point.